Recruiting never stops, especially for Georgia football. Welcome to the podcast that covers Georgia football recruiting from all angles and spotlights the legends of tomorrow. It's the Recruiting Bulldog Update, the RBU Podcast.
We go Wild Dog with Sony. Nauta goes in motion left, snap it to Michelle. He's running to the left, angling, 25-20. Got a block for Brown, 15, 10, 5, touchdown, touchdown, touchdown. Dogs win it. We're headed to Atlanta.
We hand it off to Herschel. There's a hole. 5, 10, 12. He's running over people. Oh, you Herschel Walker.
Gurley, 5 yards deep, and Todd will bring this one out. And there he goes. One block, and it might be over. Todd Gurley, coast to coast. Can he make it? Yes, he can.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the RBU Podcast. I am your host, Blaine Gilmer, where we cover everything that centers around Georgia football recruiting. And, man, what a show we have for you this week. If you're watching and listening, make sure on that YouTube channel, that Bulldawg Illustrated YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button because you're going to want to see the stuff that we have coming out through the rest of the summer on into the fall as SEC football action gets going. But remember, recruiting never stops, and that is the entire gist of this show here. If you like this show and you want to see more of my content on a daily basis, I'm a writer at BulldawgIllustrated.com. You can check out everything there. Go to Bulldawg Illustrated. That's BULLDAWG Illustrated.com. I have a daily dog thread there that you'll see up in the middle of the page. Now, in terms of our content, man, we have a ton of it, and my co-host Jeremy Johnson, who I'll bring on momentarily, is going to go through with me on all of the notes of the week that was for Georgia football, including everything from the commitment of Denylon Morrissette, a very recent offer to a former teammate of Denylon Morrissette and a current Georgia football player, Jamon Dumas Johnson, Derek Moore out of St. Francis Academy in Baltimore, Maryland. We'll cover that. Also, we're going to touch on a very successful 2021 NFL draft for the Georgia program and the recruiting implications of that. And as well, we'll focus on Georgia has the number one class in the 2022 recruiting rankings right now by 247sports.com. And we're going to talk about how they can finish with that number one class and who's the biggest threat to them and what position is the most important to that race for the number one class. Also, please stick around at the end of the show. I have a huge announcement. If you love this show's content, everything that we're doing here and want to see more of it and an expanded purview of it, you need to stick around because I think you'll really like this announcement at the end. But now, without further ado, I'm going to bring in here my co-host, Jeremy Johnson. Jeremy, how you doing, man?
I'm good, man. How you doing?
Doing great. I see you got your big Baller Brand shirt on right there. We're ready to start cooking, man. You got it. You must be, if you got the big Baller Brand on, you're going to bring that Lamar Ball heat and action to the show here. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. The big baller's always got a ball.
That's it. Well, like I said, it was a tremendous week for Georgia recruiting. Everything from a Denylon Morrissette commitment, a huge commitment there. Had just had an offer today as we're recording this on Sunday, May 2nd, had a big offer in the class of 2022. And, of course, that 2021 NFL draft and all the recruiting implications that come out of that, how that works. But first, let's touch on Denylon Morrissette. If you're watching on the YouTube channel, I'm going to go ahead and bring up the highlights here for Denylon. Jeremy, while I'm doing that, just tell the folks, how big is this commitment for Georgia in terms of starting to get going at that receiver position in this class?
Yeah, it's a big one. Anytime you want to add to a spread offense like what Todd Monken is running at Georgia, you want to get, some really skilled and versatile receiving threats. And obviously this guy can do multiple things. He's one of those bigger guys that, has those big hands that are very sticky. So I think this is a huge one. I think it's probably the first of a few guys that they will land for this class.
Absolutely. Denylon is a physical specimen. I mean, this is a guy who's in between 6'1", 6'2", probably closer to 205 pounds now, and he plays like it, Jeremy. He's a guy who he can use his body to create separation from DBs, whether it's on deep routes or high pointing a ball, or maybe even going on a intermediate breaking route, maybe a dig route, something like that, being able to kind of just not necessarily get offensive pass interference, but just kind of use that body weight and that physicality just to create enough separation. And once he catches the ball, man, he's mighty tough to bring down. You referenced a moment in the Decula game earlier this year. What kind of tell everybody what happened on that little screen route he took and then took into the end zone?
Yeah, he caught a little screen route and went in, and they thought they had him, and he just plowed through and drug the defense, and ended up scoring a big touchdown there. And that was just a piece of his physicality. You don't really use that word with receivers a lot, but this is a physical wide receiver, and he imposes his will on the football game from that position.
Absolutely. And Denylon, he had probably in that play that you're describing there, Jeremy, he probably had, I don't know, he probably had 4, 5, 6 to start off with, and then the whole defense swarms on him, and it's just one of those deals where he ends up, pushing his way in there. Linemen come in and start helping out. So big commitment there for Georgia. That's the first wide receiver commitment for Georgia in the class of 2022. Also very heavily recruiting Evan Stewart, Kojo Antwi. So just some of the guys, but Georgia having success early on. Now, I mentioned Denylon Morrissette. He was at Brookwood last year. He's going to North Cobb High School this upcoming year to play with a Georgia recruit in the class of 2023, quarterback Malachi Singleton. And then also before he ever came to Brookwood, he was at St. Francis Academy in Baltimore, Maryland. Georgia has a commit in the 2020 class who's going to be a true freshman this fall, Jamon Dumas Johnson, inside linebacker out of St. Francis Academy, on the team now. And they have just offered today, as we're recording this on May 2nd, Derek Moore, a 6'4", 245 defensive end out of St. Francis. So, not a name that we've heard before coming out of Georgia. He was just at a Under Armour camp, I believe, this weekend before this offer got pulled. But Jeremy, he's got a ton of offers from Oklahoma, Alabama, Ohio State. What do you think about this offer to a big defensive end like that from Baltimore?
Definitely an interesting one, just because of the geographical location, but the connection with that school up there, St. Francis. That's you always want to strike while the iron's hot with a situation like that, and you got a guy you like, and you got a couple of his teammates already on campus. That's always going to be something you want to try to do, and I think that's we've talked about IMG Academy and how they've gone after a few of their guys in the past. I honestly don't know a lot about Derek Moore, but
well, if you're watching on the YouTube channel right now, we've got Derek Moore's highlights going on over on the Bulldawg Illustrated YouTube channel. He's a edge rusher that really knows how to get after the quarterback, arrives to the ball with ill intent, as my former defensive coordinator used to say in high school, get there with bad intentions. And it certainly looks like Derek Moore does that. But this leads into a point that we're going to talk about later on in the show. I think in the 2022 class, based on the players that are currently committed right now to all the other schools at skill positions and things like that, it seems like some of the most talented players in the class of 2022 that are not committed so far are defensive linemen. And we'll get into that in just a minute, but I definitely agree with you. And if you're watching right here on Derek Moore's highlights, man, he really knows how to get after the quarterback, has a tremendous motor. But I think if people are, watching at home on the YouTube channel, and if you're paying attention to what's happening with Georgia, man, I think anybody can see the position that Georgia's going to be in here before too long with these edge rushers. Azeez Ojulari, he goes number 50 overall to the New York Giants. That's something that this young man has to pay attention to, of course, being an edge guy. But then, Jeremy, just how much do you think, recruiting a lot of times is about relationships. So how much do you think just Denylon and Jamon Dumas-Johnson being able to put in a good word for the University of Georgia is going to play with this late offer here for Derek Moore?
I mean, it'll be vital just because these guys haven't had an opportunity to get to know the coaches. So you have to kind of go with comfort, and comfort comes in old teammates. So, I think that's kind of what happened in Denylon's case. He plays with Gunnar Stockton in 7-on-7, and then he has a former teammate in Jamon that is already on. I don't know if he's not on campus right now, but he will be in the fall. But yeah, I think comfort comes with, knowing guys on the team already, and there aren't a lot of opportunities to get on campus right now, and there will be this summer, but, up until this is a 2022 guy, so he has to kind of start making a decision because, that clock's running out on him for a decision.
Well, and I think in order, and we're going to get into this topic, like I said, here shortly, but I think in order for Georgia to hold on to this number one spot, the edge rusher position is going to be key, because you look at what the Georgia's needs are going forward. I did an article on the top 5 needs remaining for Georgia, and defensive end, edge rusher was one of them. Whether that's Michael Williams, whether that's Kristen Miller, who could really play inside or outside, or it's a guy here like Derek Moore. You got to look at it. Nolan Smith probably going to be going to the league after this year. Adam Anderson got a chance to go really high if he has the kind of year everybody thinks he'll have. So Derek Moore could be in a place where Georgia could be saying, hey man, we're going to have some opportunity for some PT early. So this will be very, very interesting. Let's see this summer if he ends up making an official, or maybe this fall an official to Athens. And as a wise coach that I talk to from time to time tells me, if they don't visit, it don't mean a thing. So, and of course that's excluding this past COVID class, which had some unique circumstances, but I would agree if Derek Moore doesn't end up finding his way on campus, then maybe he won't be making his way to Athens, but we'll see what happens there. Now, again, I want to remind everybody, Jeremy is the recruiting reporter for Athens Banner Herald, the news publication Athens Banner Herald, and also writes on onlineathens.com. My name is Blaine Gilmer. I have realized on the screen here, very embarrassingly, that I have my Twitter handle wrong, so I'm going to edit that real quick. I got to put a R in there, but you can follow me at bgilmer18 on Twitter. Jeremy is at JeremyO_Johnson. I think is it 75, Jeremy, or is it that's your email I got on there that I'm thinking about on the
I think that's right. That's right. I can't even see it all, to be honest, but
at Jeremy O. Johnson.
That's correct.
Yeah, at Jeremy O. Johnson. You can follow him on Twitter. So if you enjoy this content, you love recruiting, follow Jeremy, his stuff over there, Athens Banner Herald, onlineathens.com. And again, you can see the Dog Daily thread and everything I have going on BulldawgIllustrated.com. That's BULLDAWG Illustrated.com. Okay, Jeremy. So now the reason we're here, we're going to talk about how does Georgia finish with the number one recruiting class in the country, which they currently have, and they've kind of extended their lead a little bit, getting Denylon Morrissette this week. How does that end up happening for them, and who do you think is going to end up being the biggest threats? Of course, LSU's there right now. Alabama's way on down the list, but if we know anything, don't take that to heart right now. So what's kind of your thoughts on this race for the 2021-2022 class for the number one recruiting class in the country?
Yeah, I think you touched on it a little earlier. I think the defensive line guys are going to be the key to this class because, that's kind of the biggest, unknown area in the recruiting class right now that, is left open. Obviously there's a couple safeties that they're still after, Kamari Wilson, Jake Pope, a couple other guys. I won't go down the list right now, but, that the defensive line is where you're going to win it. And Alabama's obviously going to be, I think they'll make a run because they have very few commits right now, if I'm mistaken. I don't have their exact number in front of me. I was trying to find them, and I'm all the way down in the 30s, and I don't see them yet. So,
Alabama is actually they're number 15 right now. You can see if you're following on the Bulldawg Illustrated YouTube channel, Alabama is 15th. They only have 6 commits, in class, 2 5-stars and 4 4-stars. Georgia, like I said, if you can see right here, is the number 1 class. They have 3 5-stars to their name, 8 4-stars and 2 3-stars for an average of 94.01 composite rating by 24/7 Sports. You've got LSU also with 13 commits. They're behind by a good 14 points there on the 24/7 composite. Ohio State at number 3 with 10 commitments. Notre Dame at 4 with 12, and Oklahoma at 9. Now, with LSU specifically, a player that comes to mind, and we mentioned having the defensive line play an important role in this race. Shamar Stewart, for a long time out of the Miami area down there, is a defensive end, edge rusher type player that at one point was ranked the number 1 recruit in the country. Now he's dropped down to about 7 or 8, still a top 10 talent in the country. And Shamar is the type of player that every school in the country wants to add to their roster. And for the longest time, Jeremy, it was LSU seemed to be a slam dunk for a lot of people. But now, from what I'm hearing, I've talked to some people down there at Mount Senior Pace, which I believe is how you pronounce it. If I butchered that, then, just pretend it didn't happen, folks, and move on. But anyways, Shamar Stewart down there, I've talked to some people down there. They said Georgia is doing a tremendous job recruiting this young man. And Coach BGA is a South Florida guy himself, and they said he speaks the lingo, kind of talks the same way, knows the environment, knows the places, speaks that South Florida language to Shamar Stewart. So, what do you think about guys like that specifically out of, Opelika, Florida there that could play a big role in this class?
Yeah, that would be, that would pretty much be that could be the nail in the coffin if, you can land that guy and not allow that guy to go to LSU, so, and having somebody that kind of speaks that lingo, and, that gives them a huge advantage into being able to, even be competitive in that, because typically a South Florida guy like that, once they seem to kind of lock on somewhere, you would think it would be kind of hard for a Georgia school to pry them away from their target, but, that would be huge if that was able to happen.
Absolutely. Going on down the list a little bit, I think the number 9 recruit in the nation, only 2 spots below him, is Travis Shaw. Travis Shaw was for a long time considered a Clemson lock. And then, right up the road from him, a guy that he's close with, knows very well, Jalen Walker, ends up surprisingly to a lot of people committing to Georgia after he was a Clemson lock there for a long time, people felt. Now people feel that Travis Shaw could be an addition to the Georgia class, potentially with Bear Alexander, who's already committed to Georgia out of Denton, Texas. So you got a player. There's Shamar Stewart. There's Travis Shaw, Walter Nolan, who we didn't even mention. He's the number 2 commit in the country. And, Alabama and Ohio State, Florida, LSU are all in on that one. So I really feel like this defensive line position, surprisingly enough, is how wide open the game is now, and everybody talks about quarterbacks, receivers, DBs, but it seems like this defensive line position could go a long way towards settling this thing.
Yeah, it always comes back to the trenches, man. Football will always be football. So, yeah, I'm with you 100%. And, Georgia lands 2 or 3 of those guys, that'll be the number 1 class, and, it'll be one of their better classes. I'm not sure what their point total would be. I don't have the formula for that, but I would think it would be really highly ranked compared to their recent class of I think it was 2018 that was number 1 in 2019.
Absolutely.
Or 2019. So
I have that here. If you're watching on the YouTube channel, you can see on the Bulldawg Illustrated YouTube channel in 2018, Georgia had a 323.31 24/7 composite score. That was a year after, in 2017, that Alabama finished with a 23.86 composite score. So that tells you how great that 2018 class was. This 2022 class, Jeremy, as you pointed out, has a great opportunity to do so. if they can finish that out. Now, Jeremy, I do want to point out that 2 in-state guys that Georgia's recruiting very heavily as well at the defensive line position, Michael Williams, Kristen Miller. A lot of people for a long time felt that it was a real possibility that Georgia could end up getting both of those young men in this class, like that Kristen Miller, Michael Williams. They're very close with current Georgia commit Tyree West, who trains with Chuck Smith over at the Dr. Rush, as they like to call him over there, in Metro Atlanta training facility, former Falcons great Chuck Smith. So a lot of people felt that Michael Williams and Kristen Miller were in there for Georgia, kind of going to be in this class. Now, Jeremy, it seems like there's some other people kind of wedging their way in there. You care to talk a little bit about Michael and Kristen, kind of what you've gathered out of those two?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't spoken to either of them in a while, but just kind of watching what they're doing. Yeah, I would definitely say there are some schools that have their attention right now. I know Christian went out to LA to visit. I guess he just kind of went out to see the city, and I know USC is high on this list. He was at G-Day also, but it was interesting to me that Michael did not attend G-Day. He was
A-Day. He went to Alabama.
A-Day. Yeah. That was interesting, and then he also visited Georgia Tech, I believe, as well for their scrimmage, which was on a Friday. So just kind of seeing that information, it's I don't know that means Georgia's downgraded, because like I said, I haven't spoken to him in a while, but yeah, it's going to be an interesting recruitment of both of those guys, because like you said, it did seem like they were going to be guys that landed in Georgia together, and that may not be happening now.
100%. And Michael Williams, like I said, going to Alabama for A-Day. Georgia Tech's recruiting him very hard. Kristen Miller, as you put out, he is a guy that's very interested in filmmaking, all that kind of stuff. So LA makes sense. Ohio State is really high on him. So, Jeremy, there's a lot going on when it comes to those two guys. And I think this defensive line class, as we mentioned, is going to determine kind of who ends up in this number 1 slot at the end of the year. LSU, Alabama, going to have a lot to say with that, with Walter Nolan, Shamar Stewart, some of these guys. So a lot to watch out for. Now, before we get into the 2021 draft and what happened for Georgia, I want to remind all of you guys that my co-host here is Jeremy Johnson at Jeremy O. Johnson, Jeremy O_Johnson on Twitter. He's a writer for the Athens Banner Herald, onlineathens.com. My name is Blaine Gilmer at BGilmer18 on Twitter. And I'm a writer, recruiting analyst for Bulldawg Illustrated. That's BULLDAWG Illustrated.com. Make sure that you go to the Bulldawg Illustrated YouTube channel. If you like this show so far, subscribe, leave us a review. It'll be great for us, and we highly appreciate it. And we want to keep bringing you as much content as we possibly can. Also, over on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, anywhere you want to listen to us, search RBU or RBU Podcast. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a review, like it, and that would be greatly appreciated. So, Jeremy, this weekend, of course, was the NFL draft, 2021 NFL draft, and there was a lot that went on. Some people want to say, well, this is a recruiting podcast. Why are you talking about the NFL draft? Well, it's directly correlated, especially when you're talking about the two schools of Alabama and Georgia, the two schools that had the most draftees of any two programs in the country. Alabama had 10. Actually, I believe there was another school, Ohio State, tied Alabama with 10, and then Georgia and Notre Dame both had 9 apiece. So that is a record for the University of Georgia, Jeremy. And how that ties back into recruiting, I wrote a piece on it. Georgia now, and yes, I'm including Justin Fields in this number because he was a recruit for the University of Georgia in 2018. Out of the 2017 and 2018 classes signed by Kirby Smart, 12 players have been selected in the NFL draft out of those two classes so far, with a plethora of them waiting in this next draft to be drafted out of that 2018 class. So those two classes are going to end up being hallmark, traditional record-setting classes for the University of Georgia. They're hoping to match that in 2021. But just your thoughts and impressions on that 2021 draft and Georgia getting 9 guys drafted, Jeremy.
Well, when you see the type of recruiting Kirby Smart and staff have done, that's just what you expect at this point. And, you know, I'm not even – honestly, I'm a little surprised that there wasn't more. Obviously, I believe Malik Herring would have joined that list had he not been injured. So they could have had 10 or it would have been 13 had he not gotten injured at the Senior Bowl. And then obviously Jordan Davis decided to go back to college. I feel like he would have been a high first, either high second or early late first draft pick in this class this year. So that's 14. So, you know, with the type of recruiting and development that's going on in Athens, I think that, you know, that's just what you expect at this point. I don't even really think it's something that you necessarily even have to make that big of a deal about at this point, just because there's so much talent on the roster. And like you said, this next year they could even push to even break that. And then the year after that, I mean, it's just going to keep getting – the number's going to keep growing, and it will be close to what Alabama's is for the next few years for sure.
One of those things that I think, you know, we talked about the 2022 class and how you stay on top. Defensive line definitely is going to be a big deal, but so is defensive back as well. Kamari Wilson, Keon Saab, Jake Pope, guys that Georgia is going after tremendously. And I think there is no greater recruiting tool than what Georgia can put out there, that their entire starting 5 from their secondary this year is now on a NFL roster, whether it was by draft or by undrafted free agent. In the case of DJ Daniel, every single starter in the secondary from either the year before or this year now on an NFL roster. That is a powerful recruiting tool, is it not, Jeremy?
Absolutely. And then you even count the guys that David Wilson and Tyreek Stevenson who will transfer. I think both of those guys will have a chance to get drafted at some point in the near future as well. So, yeah, I mean, that's a selling tool that you can just go to. Say, you come here and play. You may not even have to play every snap. You may be a rotational guy, and you can still find your way onto an NFL roster, because at the end of the day, that's what these kids' goals are. That's why you play the game. So, you know, when you tell a young 16, 15-year-old kid that's something that's going to go a long way. And you have the statistics and the people on NFL rosters to prove it. So
100%. And then, you know, people like to talk about development. And I think one of the knocks that people bring against Kirby is that he can't develop guys. Well, one, just look at all the NFL talent. Like I said, that throws that theory out the window. I think what people really mean when they say that is that, well, they're not developing guys the exact same way that Alabama has. Well, let me tell you something. Nobody else has or ever will probably close to that. There's a reason that Nick Saban is probably the greatest to ever do it. And, you know, the sad thing for a lot of the Georgia faithful out there, they got to deal with old Saint Nick there for a few more years at least. I don't feel he's anywhere close to giving it up. But we talked about before, you know, recruiting's important in terms of Georgia being able to promote those 9 guys that they had, including Eric Stokes, who was a 3-star. I think people lose track of that. He was a 3-star
running back in high school.
Running back, a track guy, purely didn't have much defensive back technique. Mark Webb, who gets drafted by the Los Angeles Chargers, was a wide receiver coming out. He goes as a DB. So
Jay Crowder was a running back a couple years ago also.
Ends up being in the running for Defensive Rookie of the Year for the Giants this past year. So a lot of development is occurring at the University of Georgia. I think one thing people lose track of is they think, oh, well, as good as the draft was for Georgia, it was even better for Alabama with, you know, 8 guys taken in the first 2 rounds, something along those lines, 6 first-rounders. Yes, it's very impressive for Alabama. I think one thing that the only thing Kirby Smart can sell out of that is saying, yes, Alabama has a great program. They develop guys. You're going to go to the league, but the only program that has consistently been close to them here is the University of Georgia, not just in putting guys in the league, not just in terms of, you know, the contracts guys signed in the NFL, but also on the field. Georgia has led Alabama in all 3 games that they've played against them. Kirby Smart can sell you can be a part of the team, a part of the class that kind of gets us over the hump And you talked about a concept before, Jeremy, I think, in that Alabama 2017 class, which has had 8 first-rounders come out of it. Think of that. That 2017 class for the University of Alabama has had 8 members of it drafted in the first round of the NFL draft now. That's a quite impressive stat. But you talked about in that class, what you were most impressed with was their ability, their not being afraid to double up on guys. What touch on that? Talk about that for people. What are you talking about when they're not afraid to go out and double up?
Well, a lot. In that class in particular, they brought in a 5-star quarterback, which was Tua Tagovailoa, and Mac Jones was a 4-star quarterback, and they both came in together. And I thought it was really interesting that they went after Tua hard, but then they recruited Mac hard as well. So, they obviously saw something in him, and they were able to sell that. Hey, we have a plan for you, and we have whether it was Tua or Mac. Hey, whoever wins this battle will eventually have his time to shine. And they talked us 18-year-old kid into doing what's best for their development long term versus I need to go and play right now. That's rare to do nowadays because there's so many opportunities for highly ranked guys to go somewhere and play and get on the field right away and go off to the NFL. And looking at all these receivers they got, if I'm a receiver, I want the ball. So that's how you get to lead, catching the passes, making the touchdowns. But they were able to split up 4 really highly recruited guys and, make them all superstars. And they've all gone in the first round. I mean, I thought that's probably the most impressive thing. And then at the offensive tackle position, they had a couple guys that Willis. I can't remember. I want to say was Leatherworth in that class as well.
Yeah, they had Alex Leatherwood. They had Jedrick Wills. They had, in terms of the same position, they had Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs both in that class. Mm-hmm. So, like you're talking about, not afraid to stack that talent, and they were not afraid to, they were able to convince those players that if you come here, you're going to face this competition day in and day out and practice, and that's what's going to prepare you even more for the league. So, definitely a high selling point there. Now, in terms of Georgia and kind of putting a bow on this, if they were going to double up on guys, of course, Georgia already has Bear Alexander there, a 5-star defensive tackle. Can they convince a Walter Nolan to come in on top of him, a Travis Shaw to come in on top of him, to have 2 5-star guys there at the interior defensive line? At the safety position, they have a Malachi Starks there. Can they convince a Kamari Wilson to team up with him? Can they convince a Keon Saab from IMG as well to maybe form a trio there? That would be an unbelievable feat for Georgia if they can do that. And then finally at the receiver position, they've got Denylon Morrissette now. Can they convince Kojo Antwi to join aboard? Can they convince Evan Stewart? So a lot of guys that have a potential that, like you're talking about, if Georgia just gets a couple of these in places and retains what they already have, this could end up blowing away that 2018 class in terms of composite rating and securing that number 1 position.
Absolutely. And I think, it's when people try to compare the two situations, it's to me, it's apples and oranges because I think Alabama's a little bit in a position where they're old money at this point. If you go back and really look at what they were doing at the beginning, they would get one guy. Like they got Julio Jones, they got Mark Ingram, and they had one guy. This didn't start happening until recently with Alabama because they've been winning championships. The guys that they're bringing in, their makeup is, hey, if we win championships and I'm a part of that, that also brings attention to me versus I got to go out here and catch 80 balls and catch 25, run for 1,200 yards and whatever you need to get to statistically to be able to make it to the NFL. So the guys that Alabama's bringing in they seem to have that makeup that, team success equals individual success. And that's true also. I also think that Georgia, when they sell this situation where you're saying, hey, come and team up with, we got 3 safeties, but you can come here and be the 3rd guy, but you'll still get on the field. I think Georgia's doesn't have the selling point of, hey, we're winning championships. come and be a part of a team, play special teams, pay your dues. They don't really have that cachet yet. So I think their way to selling this is that, okay, look, if you play on the defensive line or you're an edge guy, you're going to play 25 snaps a game as a freshman because we rotate. Like Georgia rotates every couple plays, and that's how they keep guys fresh. But it also gives them an opportunity to tell people that they can come in and play early because they use a lot of guys and use a lot of bodies. So
100%, I agree. And that is Jeremy Johnson, my co-host from the Athens Banner Herald. Jeremy, appreciate all the insight this week. And now I'm gonna transition here into that big announcement I got for the folks. So, Jeremy, we will see you next week, my friend.
I appreciate it. You have a good one.
All right, see you guys. All right, so here we go. Now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the big announcement that I got coming up. If you follow me on Twitter, bgilmer18, you will know that I've signed a contract with Believe Podcast Network to take what we're doing here on the podcast, the RBU Podcast, and take it into a more SEC extensive form. Guys, we're going to be bringing a show to you, and I'm going to reveal the name right here. It's going to be called Recruiting Every Second. SEC, big in the word second, of course. And it will drop starting next week on the Believe Podcast Network. It will also be every week still on the Bulldawg Illustrated YouTube channel. Very excited to be talking about not just Georgia recruiting, but all other recruiting here. And thank you so much for listening. Make sure to subscribe to the Georgia Bulldawg YouTube channel. Make sure that you follow all of our social media accounts, and then search on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify for RBU Podcast. If you go ahead and subscribe, those links, those feeds are going to remain the same when we go to Believe in Recruiting Every Second, and that will focus on SEC recruiting. Thank you. I'm Blaine Gilmer, and we'll catch you guys next week.